today we meet Wordsworth again.
Yeah, which is always a nice person to meet and discuss.
So we have today his poem composed upon Westminster Bridge, September the 3rd, 1802, which is an interesting name for a poem. Just short and catchy.
Yeah. Well, he's known for his ability to put his ideas into words, so that probably is a very important idea. Is it a famous poem? I think I've heard of it.
Maybe?
Maybe because I read it as part of my homework. Maybe that's where I first heard it. Yeah.
Well, obviously it's not as famous as the Daffodils. Well, if you talk about Wordsworth, how can you say that some of his poems are not famous? They're all famous because he is amazing. Okay, so if you say something composed upon then what do you expect to read? Does it sound like a lyrical name?
Not necessarily. It sounds like a comment to something written by a famous poet. If I'm commenting on Wordsworth's works, I might say, okay, so this daffodil thing was composed under certain circumstances, and this thing was composed upon Westminster Bridge. And if I'm very lucky, I can even give the date. And I understand that many literary critics or writers of critical articles will be very happy to find out when exactly it was. And here it's the other way around. So it's like Wordsworth already thinks of the future generations that might be looking at the poem, discussing it, and giving their critique or something. And that's why he gives all the details necessary, except the most important thing. That is what the poem is all about.
Yeah. So why would it be important that it was composed upon Westminster Bridge and not somewhere else and on that particular day? It's so important that he puts it into the title.
Well, maybe. Well, Westminster Bridge is, I think, a very particular designation. So it means it's happening at Westminster, London, a busy city even in Wordsworth's days, and we know when it was. It's the very beginning of the 19th century, 1802. Maybe you might think that a certain event in history happened on the 3rd of September 1802. And if you have good memory, you probably remember all the dates. So this happened on the 3rd of September, this happened on the 4th.
Yeah.
So I don't have such memory, so I don't remember anything. Except, of course, the general circumstances of Europe, Napoleonic wars, and so on. But maybe it's just because he wants to think of two opposing things. Westminster brings us to the city, to urban, how do they call cityscapes. And September is probably more meaningful if the whole story is happening in the country, somewhere in the countryside, because you can sort of relate to what September brings. Now these two collide and a poem emerges. Yes, I know I sound silly, but I'm accustomed to it.
Yeah.
People grow accustomed to it as they...
Why? Because it's all fairy. Silly is good. Yeah, so maybe when he says Westminster Bridge, you don't expect to see something lyrical. Because if it says composed on the top of a mountain this, or in a beautiful little valley that, or on the isle of this, then you expect something lyrical. If it says Westminster Bridge,
Yeah.
what? So what? And September the 3rd, 1802, specific date. And maybe it was such a beautiful moment he wanted to fix it, to say that's the big day or the big beautiful moment. Write it down, mark it on your calendar. You should celebrate it, like I celebrated with a poem. Maybe he was just too lazy to think about the name, so he just wrote the circumstances.
Maybe.
Because maybe it's just like a little sketch more than a big poem.
Yeah, and in fact, I don't know anything about Wordsworth manuscripts, but it's a well-known fact that many poets just scribble something and they might often add a picture or something that looks like a tiny picture of that reminds them of the circumstances of the place, and they can probably resume working on the poem later, or they can just leave it as it is. And again, if you are a publisher and you're lucky, you can also print the poem alongside the sketch. So this is like a small sketch without drawing something, he just...
Okay, so let's read it. Earth has not anything to show more fair. Dull would be he of soul who could pass by, a sight so touching in its majesty. The city now doth, like a garment, wear the beauty of the morning, silent, bare. Ships, towers, domes, theatres and temples lie open unto the fields and to the sky, all bright and glittering in the smokeless air. Never did sun more beautifully steep in his first splendour valley, rock or hill. Ne'er saw I, never felt a calm so deep. The river glideth at his own sweet will. Dear God, the very houses seem asleep, and all that mighty heart is lying still. So the little detail he forgets to mention in the title is that this was somewhere at 5 in the morning, which maybe changes things a bit. So what's your impression?
The impression of something magical, because Westminster Bridge is in London. It is a big city, it is a busy city, it is overcrowded. It is full of buildings. Some of them are probably pretty, some of them are probably not very pretty. But what we see when we look at it with Wordsworth's eyes is a beautiful place to be. Nothing is said about the crowds, because there are no crowds. Nothing is said about the fog or smoke. In fact, he specifically mentions that there is this like smoke-free environment, you expect something about the city. You get something that looks magnificent, despite of the fact that it is in the city, and that makes it both very attractive and very interesting, because you can think, okay, we can't see lots of stars when we are in the city, we can't see lots of beautiful things when we are in the city, we feel disconnected with nature, but no, it doesn't have necessarily to be the case. You can stay connected if, again, we have eyes that, if we allow our eyes to see beyond the obvious, beyond the very first impression that a busy city might produce.
Yeah, so what he does here is something really, really amazing. Called usually we have the position, the city and the countryside,
Yes.
city and nature. We have the position. So either we see it in poetry, we see like, oh, let's go way far from the busy cities, they are dead places, let's go into nature. If we think about romantic poetry, or if we think about urbanistic poetry, then they say, well, city is different from the country, but it's also interesting, also has its own beauty. But here Wordsworth does the third thing. He says, city is nature. City is a kind of nature. There isn't much difference between mountains or houses. If you look at the outlines, you can see it, you can feel it. Even if you walk around Moscow, you look at the big buildings, and they do remind you of mountains in a way. They do. They do, especially mushrooms.
Poisonous mushrooms.
No, magic mushrooms.
Magic mushrooms.
Well, especially if you have a bit of fog here in Moscow and it just lies somewhere on the top of a taller building. So I was like, reminds me of mountains. So you can see it even in the city. And it depends on your eye, indeed, how you look at it. And you need to know the time and place. Because if you get devoured by the city, if you're in the middle of a busy crowd, then you may not see it. You may see it, you may not see it. But here, at 5 in the morning on the bridge, you can see the true nature of the city. And so saying that it's composed upon Westminster Bridge and not somewhere else, because the bridge is not mentioned in the poem. We just see the river, but it doesn't mean that he was looking at it from the bridge. Mentioning the bridge becomes important. Why?
I don't know. Maybe it's because, for one, it's geographically speaking, it's probably one of the busiest parts of London, and today, as far as I understand, it's really overcrowded by both Londoners and tourists. So it's not the thing that he is sketching out here. And of course the other thing is concerns the word bridge. Because bridge often means, well, always means a connection, and here it might mean a connection between what you said is a countryside landscape and a city, picture of a city. So both are sort of interconnected, and of course there's something that might remind us, as we stand on the bridge, might remind us of the rainbow. And again, it produces certain... So a rainbow, to some extent, looks like a bridge. So when you think of bridges, you also think of things which are much more magical, which are not man-made, and which might be really amazing to look at.
Yeah, he doesn't talk about rainbows here, but yeah, you may say so. And if it's a bridge, yeah, it connects two sides, but if you're on the bridge, again, you're neither here nor there, you're in between, in that space which does not belong to either part. So where is he? He is nowhere. If you're on the bridge, it means you're not on the ground, because you're on the bridge, you're somewhere in the middle of air, you're in the air, there's water below you.
So these all substances are present because you are in the air, you're sort of in the sky, there's water below you, so some of the things that compose the universe collide.
Yeah, because usually the bridge is not the point of destination. Yeah, it means to travel. And if you stop there, you stop in between. In between. It doesn't matter if it's in between two sides of the city. Poetically speaking, you're in between realities either way. Okay. Yeah. So here he brings the beauty back to the city. He restores the balance, but again his fellow poets may say, no, you're not supposed to say that city is beautiful. No, you're supposed to say that city is horrible. You're supposed to say that only mountains are beautiful. He says, guys, you sure you're poets?
Yeah, let Wordsworth look at London as it is today and see what happens.
Okay, or you can look at Moscow. It's bigger than London.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Okay. Right, let's have a look at the Earth has not anything to show more fair.
Yeah. Here the first word is earth, and well, what is it? We are told that we are in London, not in the countryside. We expect something about the city, and the very first word is the word earth, that really belongs to the countryside in one of its meanings, or belongs to everywhere in its more general meaning.
Yeah, when you say earth, you can smell earth, you can see earth, and you don't think about cities when I say earth. So you don't see much earth in cities, but he can. Earth has not anything to show more fair. But still we talk about things. Maybe there are no things more fair than London. But if we talk about things, then we can feel the majesty here. And again, he says, he starts with saying that the city is not a human thing. A city is a kind of nature. So nature uses ants to build ant hills, and nature uses humans to build human hills, known as towns and cities, but still it's nature doing its work, her work. Earth has not anything to show more fair. And all the poets look at it and they're like, no! How can you? Look, I wrote a poem about mountains, I wrote a poem about butterflies, I wrote a poem about flowers, surely they're more fair. I got a poem about rainbows and unicorns, surely they're more fair.
About women.
Women, yeah, those not things.
Not
Surely they're more fair. How can you possibly say that this horrible, dirty pig called London? Hello. Did I say something wrong? How can you say that this dirty, awful mitten hip of London is the most fairest thing in the universe? How can you? And the Wordsworth was like, that was just the first line, you know. And that's the normal reaction of most people to the first line. Yeah, they know it's the Westminster Bridge, so he can get straight to the business. They know it's about London. And to everyone who thinks so, who says so, he knows, he's well aware of that reaction. So what he says is, dull would be he of soul who could pass by a sight so touching in its majesty. He says, you think London is dull, because you are dull. If you think something is boring, that's because you are boring. Things are not interesting or boring in themselves. Things are not beautiful or ugly in themselves. It's only you who make it so. So if you think that something is boring, then there's something very boring in you. That's what he says here. Dull would be he of soul who could pass by, a sight so touch in its majesty. By rhymes with majesty, apparently. So we talk about soul here. We talk about earth, maybe like body, like earthly matter. And we talk about soul. And so we connect it, we say it's the most beautiful thing, as in matter, thing, earth, but also it's very beautiful in spiritual sense, in cosmic sense, in the sense of soul. Thou would be he of soul. And he says he, but he doesn't mean just he, just anyone. Now, thou would be he of soul. And it's an interesting term. He of soul. Do you often say, when you describe a person, well, it's a he of soul? So why here? Thou would be a man who could pass by, a sight so touching. But he of soul.
Maybe it's because the word soul becomes much more important when it's in the midst of dull, would he be, and who could pass by. Soul is really important. Again, we imagine London or any other big city as a place devoid of soul, but it isn't. It isn't.
Mm-hmm.
It is. It has got its own soul, and if you can't feel it happening to be together with Wordsworth on Westminster Bridge, then it's your problem. It's the problem of your soul. Many people, including me, don't really see lots of beautiful things where beautiful things are to be found. And again, this is not because we think, oh, there's not enough beauty. We think there's lots of bad things that exist in this world. What Wordsworth is saying is, that's not because fair things do not exist. That's because there's something wrong with your souls. You can't see them. You can't experience what there is. Maybe under the surface.
The sight is touching. The sight touching means it touches you, literally. Yeah, it touches you, but can you feel it? Can you feel it touching you, or can you only feel it when it hits you, when it smashes you really badly? And I guess he also reminds us of soul, that not only we are practical beings, but we also have a soul. Yeah, earth and soul. Because if you think about London, maybe you start thinking in practical ways. Like London is a place for business more than for living, especially more than for beauty. You come to London, then you have some business to do, you have practical things to think about. But you have a soul, and maybe you should just stop a moment.
Yeah, and he mentions the word city not in the first film, but of course the city can mean both London and the part of London where business is conducted. So again, you might think of it as only a place where there's business to be done, or where there are political affairs to be considered. Again, Westminster is pretty close to...
Yeah. Well, the city could be also just a city as opposed to country. Yeah, we know it's Westminster. It's not somewhere in the outskirts of London. It's the very heart of London. Like you say, it's about business, about politics, and it's very easy to get distracted in all these things. But he shows that even here, it doesn't matter, even here we have the majesty. And I guess the word majesty here is a bit of a joke.
Is it?
Well, I guess it is, because if you think about like His Majesty, Her Majesty, Westminster, London, and majesty as in grandeur of nature, grandeur of the universe. So when he says a sight so touching in its majesty, on one hand we have a movement, we look at something, let's say, small, specific, he of soul, touched. If you say touched, then it's a point. Yeah? Someone touches you, it's touching a point. So we get really focused on the touch, and then he says the word majesty, and it expands. We feel it. At the same time, we kind of compare the majesty of kings and queens and the majesty of nature, of infinity, which is infinitely more majestic than the majesty of their majesties. Yeah. So it's a very clever poem in that sense. Sight so touching its majesty. Because if you're on Westminster Bridge, again, it's a place in between, and you may start thinking about business and politics, and the word majesty comes to you in a different context. Or you can ignore it. You can ignore it for a moment safely, because...
We can't ignore it.
No, we can't ignore it. Because it's there anyway. So anyway, it's not going anywhere, so you can ignore it for a second.
We can ignore it for 3 more.
Okay. Right. The city now doth like a garment wear the beauty of the morning, silent bare, ships, towers, domes, theatres and temples lie open unto the field and to the sky. Okay, the city now doth like a garment wear the beauty of the morning. So anyone, not Wordsworth, let's say, the beauty of the morning, dull, boring. Everyone says beauty of the morning, but he's okay with that, because that's how he feels, that's what he says. But the city becomes a person, and the city with a capital S, like a name, the city, and the garment is the beauty of the morning, and you can feel it, and you can see it. How usually we think about night covering the city or the place with its darkness, but here we have the morning covering the place with its beauty, because things do look very different early in the morning, same as they do look and act very differently at night. Like a garment wear the beauty of the morning, so the city is alive. It's not just a thing, not just a technical place. It's alive, it has its spirit, and it likes to be stylish. The beauty of the morning. And then we have an interesting list here. Silent bare shapes, towers, domes, theatres and temples. So silent bare shapes, towers, all mixed together. So again, a silent and bare are not exactly the words you would use to describe London, unless you're doing some post-apocalyptic film.
Yeah, or unless you want to describe London in spring 2020. which is probably...
Ah, you have not seen it. London in 2020. There was a really big riot, really big protesting. The first night of the new lockdown. Just so many people went out into the streets, thousands probably. Just peacefully coming out into streets and for hours and hours. And the policemen were like, too many of them. And then there was a funny moment when they were like, who can we arrest? So many people, they all big and scary. And they decided to arrest an old woman. And that's the most fantastic footage I've ever seen this year. I have it on my page somewhere, I think. So it's like, they're all recording on their mobile phones, so they have the something to show at the court if needed, or on just on YouTube to see what is happening. And so this old woman, she's like, again, she's filming it on her phone, and she's like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 policemen to arrest one 60-year-old lady. And they are trying to tell her to go home. They say, go home or we'll give you a ticket. And she's like, what ticket? You have no right. And she's like super master in law. And she knows more about law than the policemen do. And she can answer tenfold to all that they tell her. So we're like, oh no, that was the wrong old lady. Nor on the news. Nor on the news. Nobody talks about London rising for freedom. Nowhere. You just have it mentioned very briefly on big websites somewhere down the page. So it's not in the front news where it should be. Really thousands and thousands of people. So don't be so sure about London in 2020. Freedom! Yeah. The city now doff like a garment wear the beauty of the morning, silent, bare. Like, are you sure it's London? Silent and bare? Where have you seen London silent and bare? And he's like, Pips, have you tried getting up at 4 in the morning, maybe? You do have people at 4 and 5 in the morning, but maybe not that many. There are shapes, towers, domes, theatres and temples. So what is the logic? Is there logic in the list, in the order?
Well, at first sight, there isn't. It's just a list, just listing what comes to Wordsworth's mind. But anyway, because when you just say things, you can mention this and this and this. You can say ships, towers, domes, theatres, temples. When you say things and then write things, obviously you can pay more attention to your list. So it's likely that there is certain logic behind.
Well, how do you feel when you read it?
The first...
Oh, I forgot to put the recording on. Oh dear. We were talking about the big rising in London on the first night of lockdown, how thousands of people went into the street protesting, and now we're back to Wordsworth, and we discuss the line about shapes, towers, domes, theatres and temples, and whether there's any logic in this particular order. Thank you. Yeah.
So there might be some logic because when you say for example, silent, you speak of something that might produce a noise or might remain silent, so maybe it's something man-made, maybe. When you say bare, you think of something natural, like pure bare nature, like bare skin.
Bare mountain.
Or bare mountain, something like that. And then you say ships, and ships are of course built by people, but they again serve, they usually as rivers and seas, and again, exactly as the bridges do, their function is to connect people. They do belong to London as a city of business and commerce, but there's much more about all those ships than just plain commerce. And again, when you say silent ships, bare ships.
No, we don't say silent bare ships. We say the garment all the morning, the city. The city is silent and bare, which already is strange when you talk about London. But we create emptiness, we create absence, no sound, silence, and no things in it. It's bare. And then first we create this empty space, and then we start recreating it. It's like things appearing from fog. Now there's nothing, now there's one, two, this, that. So first we see the shapes. Maybe because the shapes are not fixed. They don't belong to the land, they belong to the river. They come and go, but just now they're silent. They're not activated. Or then just sit there. Then we look up, we see the towers of London.
Well, not the tower, but many towers, and they are of course something that immediately attracts attention because of its tall frame or something. And ships and towers are interconnected because there's this lighthouse or whatever. What's the word? Lighthouse.
Oh no, you don't think about lighthouse in London, no.
There are no such things, but maybe it's, well, I don't know. Maybe it's
maybe a tower is like town. Towers, so it's already big. A tower is bigger than a house, and it's more specific than buildings. So if you say tower, there is some dignity to it, some again a majestic feeling about it. Yeah. A tower for a king.
Yeah, tower for a king, or its connection to castles, palaces, something that brings us back.
Yeah. Then we say domes, and again we don't think small. We don't look at little houses, actual houses where people live, because shape is not where people live. Well, they do, but so tower is not a house, it's something bigger. A dome is not a house, again it's something more specific. Where do we see the dome?
Well, normally that's where the churches are.
Yeah, we don't see churches, we see domes. There might be something else, observatory of sorts, we don't know, but again it's something big, something cultural.
Yeah, and something that, as far as I understand, requires a lot of effort on part of the engineers or architects.
Yeah, so again, we're not seeing things which we might see in the countryside in a village. Yeah. We see something which is specific to a big city.
Yeah, because ships probably very unfamiliar in small villages. You can have boats, but ships are much bigger, much more important. And then, of course, tower is also much more important. Dome is not just a roof, it's, again, much bigger and much more, and creates a much more powerful impression.
And then we say theatres. Very interesting, because if you say towers, domes, they're a bit hazy. You can't see them clearly, you don't know what it is. Now he sees theatres, and not something else, not pubs, but theatres. Not factories, but theatres. So why mention theatres?
Maybe because they are, if we understand them literally, then theatres are probably more interesting for a folk than the factory is, or a pub is. But again, we often think of lives, people's lives, as part of something that's happening on stage, as a big human theatre.
Yeah, thanks to Shakespeare.
Yeah, and the entire London, with its various parts that don't look like each other, where different sorts of people live and work and go about their business or just stay lazy, and again, this looks like a huge theatre, and for someone who is gifted poetically, this provides for an interesting scene to look at.
Yeah, and then he says temples.
Yeah, again, maybe domes and temples somehow touch upon each other, because many domes are constructed upon temples, but again, theatre is something full of color and full of things which are both high things and base things, but a temple is very different in comparison to the theatre. It's a temple is something that presupposes certain feelings, certain pattern of thinking. It connects us like the tower does. It connects us to the sky.
Yeah, what we can say here is he goes from small things, like a ship might not even belong to the place. It comes and goes. It's relatively small. Then it gets bigger. Tower, dome, because dome is more specific than a tower, and usually it's connected with something more advanced, let's say. Then we see specific things. We see theatres, as you say, as in human theatre or mundane business, you may say. All the mundanity, all the drama that happens in human lives. And then we get even bigger. We say temples. We think about God and connection to God and spirits, spirituality, you may say. Yeah, so the list has its logic. It grows. The picture grows bigger, bigger, bigger. So domes and temples are mentioned, but they are different. Must be. And then they lie. Even that is not true. It's not the ultimate truth. They lie. You think it's a theatre, you think it's a temple, but really it's mountains, really it's hills. Lie open unto the fields and to the sky. So all human things, small, bigger, 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 up to religion, all of that is open to the fields. What fields? Where do you have fields in London?
We
How
used
can
to
they
have-
lie open into the fields?
Well, there is this famous Saint Martin in the Fields, but that's not what he means. So isn't it to show that all London, for all its majestic beauty in the early hours of the morning, is small as compared to a huge landscape of nature? It's fields, so something that is here on Earth,
Yeah.
and sky. The sky is something that is
Yeah, and by putting fields and sky together, we show that the fields are as big as the skies, and skies are sort of fields for us. So they lie open into the fields, into the sky. So whatever you do down in London, you think you're doing a big business, whether it's your drama, your business, your religion, but in the end, it all lies open to the sky. It's all nothing compared to the big freedom. And we bring lots of air here by saying fields and sky, because when you have lots and lots of things, like sheep towers don't sit as temples, you make the place smaller by crowding it. And now we rebalance it by adding this really huge amount of space and air, the fields and the sky. All bright and glittering in the smokeless air. The smokeless is priceless. Now, why would you say smokeless? You negate something that you expect to be there. If you don't expect something to be there, you don't mention it at all. Like you don't say crocodile-less river of the Thames. Yeah, because you don't expect to be crocodiles. But if you expect the city to be covered in smoke, then it's logical to say smokeless air, to make a point of it.
Yeah, and to many people, I think in the 19th century, London is covered with smoke due to the many factories, due to the merger of smoke and fog, and
Well, don't think it's only 19th century, because I have friends and their parents would remember the times like that. You come to London, it's all in funny.
it's all funny. Why do they...
It's all
Let me stop
black
it,
smoke.
maybe.
Yeah. Oh, you stopped it. Cool.
It's still recording, 10 more minutes.
Okay. All bright and glittering and smokeless air. And again, he creates a picture which is beautiful. Again, bright and glittering. We like it when it's bright and glittering. And people will read it and say like, are you sure it's London? Are you sure it's London, love? And seen it bright and glittering for ages. You've been drinking something, eh? Having a dream. And he says, well, no, it just was at 4 in the morning. You know, before the business opens. Smokeless air. So the smokeless air really tells us volumes about the situation. Smokeless. Because when you walk there in the day and it's all covered in smoke, then you don't see the brightness, you don't see anything glittering. But to his eye, he can see it. Never did sound more beautifully steep in his first splendor, Valley Rocco Hill.
So now we were in the air, in the smokeless air. Now we are up in the sky. we're looking at the beautiful sun, or the sun that beautifully stepped and there's the word beautiful.
Yeah,
there's again, and there's the word splendor. Again, the very sound of these words, I think, matches the glittering mentioned previously, all those bright things, and of course the word air is also very light, and because it is smokeless, it's transparent, it's probably, yeah. So there's this.
Yeah, so again, the same as with daffodils, we have lots and lots and lots of happy words in this poem. We have, from the beginning, we have earth, we like earth, we have fair, we have majesty, maybe, we have beauty and morning. We like beauty, we like morning. Morning is freshness, it's new beginnings. Then we have open. Open's good. We have fields and sky. Again, gives us freshness, gives us space. We have bright, we have glittering. We like sparkly things. We have air. We have smoke, but then we get rid of it. Smoke less. We have air, then we have sun. We love sun because it's nice and shiny. We have beautiful again. We have splendor. We have first, the beginning again of splendor. We have sweet, heart. We have lots and lots of happy words in here. So as we read it, we feel relaxed. So never did sun more beautifully steep. So again, we begin with the negation. Never, never before. It's only today. It's September the 3rd. Remember the date. And never did sun more beautifully steep in his first splendor. So again, the sun is alive. It's a he. The city is alive. Probably a she, because cities are usually she, wearing garments. Valley, rock or hill. So again we bring nature, we compare with nature, and we say city is somewhere along the same lines. It can be a valley, can be a rock, can be hill, or can be London. There's no difference. And again we have this variety of valley and rock and hill, different kinds of landscapes.
And different kinds of sounds. So valley and hill produce this softer sound, and rock makes for a nice variety, valley, rock or hill.
Yeah. So again, maybe it's a bit of a joke on poetry, because the sunset in the mountains, the sunrise in the valley, how fantastic, how beautiful. And here he says, well, you know what? You know what? Have a look at this. No! You've killed poetry! How could you kill poetry? How can we write another poem now? Oh no, have you done? Stupid, Billy. Never do it again. In his first splendor, valley, rock or hill, and also by mentioning it, he kind of brings in here all the poetry, all the beauty of those places, all the poetry, all the beauty of the sunrise in such places. So he sets the level, because when you think about sunrise in the valley, it's something extremely beautiful, and he says, well, this is extremely more beautiful there. His first splendor, beautiful. Now so I now felt the calm so deep. So again, a little joke here, or a little shock here. How on earth can you feel in London? Are you mad? Let's stop what you're supposed to tell people. You're supposed to tell them to go to faraway places, so they spend all their money on tickets. They spend 10 weeks just to get there. There they can feel deep calm, because they have no money to worry about, because they have none left. You can't possibly say that you might be calm and happy anywhere at all, even in London. No! Go away, you're not a poet. Guys, are you sure you're poets? Eh? So the whole poem is like one big tongue-in-the-cheek, really, teasing classical poetry. Oh, nature. Oh, sit down, nature. Yes. Oh, he knows it. He is well aware of it, because we have a second line which says, "Who does not agree with me is dull and boring." I'm not talking to you. If you don't agree with me, I'm not talking to you because you're boring. I'm not talking to boring people. Go away.
I'm going away.
I never felt I come so deep. Right, no, we just have 3 lines really. 3 lines left. So the moral is, what's the moral? Get up early, get some fresh air, be happy. The river glideth at his own sweet will.
Yeah. Again, you mentioned some of the happy words, including words in this line. So some sounds, river, and then lithe, sweet, will, and the sound probably reflects this special thing about the river, which is still and moving little by little at its own sweet will. And of course he doesn't say it about when he speaks about the river, he says his will. So again, nature is feminine, the river is masculine, and we do not think of either the river or something as just inanimate things. They become things that possess their own wills, their own souls, and everything seems to be alive. It's still, and yet it is alive. It is sleeping maybe, or it is just about to rise, and that makes a very beautiful, that makes for a very beautiful
And of course, if you talk about the river, then he speaks about himself too, or more broadly about man in his universe.
Yeah.
So he has his own sweet will. He's a free person. Maybe there is destiny, but it's not absolute. Hey, you have your will, you glide at your sweet will, you glide through life. Again, you're not rushing, you're gliding, which is a peaceful movement, calm, peaceful movement. It's sweet, again, So you move like a river for your life. The river glides at his own sweet will. Maybe it's his thoughts gliding. Maybe. Oh, dear God. So we have in this mapping, in this universe, we have, on one hand we have a nature which is alive, but we have God. It's not like a pantheism or something. No, it's just the sun is alive in the sense that people are alive. The river is alive and has his will, like people are alive and have their will. But we have God in this universe, one God with a big J, dear God. Dear God. Well, so we don't see the dark side in here. We see the bright side. We kind of know it's there because we have word like smokeless, which suggests that at some other time the place, the picture would not be as bright and glittering as at this moment. But still, at this moment, we look at the bright side. We know there is a dark side, but we don't look at it because it will be there anyway. We deal with it every day. There's too much of it. We know it's there, but we need to look at the beautiful too. Because it's important to look at the dark side and not to be afraid of the dark side. To have the courage to go there, to have the courage to look at it. But if you only look at the dark side, it can suck you in, like with Star Wars and Darth Vader, for those who knows the films. Yeah, he went to the dark side, so they had the light side and the dark side of power. And originally that person was on the light side, he was a good guy, but then he got worried about his wife, who got a bit sick. And the dark side lied to him. They said, if you come to the dark side, we'll teach you how to save your wife. And he believed them and moved to the dark side to explore it. He said, I'm not going to be a bad guy, I'm the good guy, but I just want to know their ways in case if they can help me save my wife. And eventually he just went into it deeper and deeper, and in the end he became the bad guy, and his wife died all the same. So that's we need to look at the bright side too. We need to keep the balance. If we only look at the bright side, then obviously we are deluding ourselves. But if we only look at the dark side, we are deluding ourselves as well. We need the balance. So today we have the balance with Wordsworth. We've been looking at something which is not about the usual things. Unhappy, dying and stuff. We have splendor, we have calm, we have peace, we have gold, sweetness, will. So God, again, God is not opposed to nature, as it often happens. God is above nature, but nature has its will too. Everything's alive. Dear God, the very houses seem asleep. So finally we see houses, not some fancy towers and domes, but normal houses. So we say, in the middle of that mixture, there is humanity. It's not just something intellectual and something about business and something about religion. There is humanity in it too. There's normal, ordinary people, houses. The very houses seem asleep. So at the moment, people are asleep, and oh, he is so beautiful when he's asleep. So when people wake up, they can be quite nasty, but it's not their fault, it's not their true nature. When they're asleep, well, then you can see the true nature. He's so nice when he's asleep. Yeah, the very houses seem asleep. They're not really asleep, but they seem asleep. And all that mighty heart is lying still. What is the meaning of that mysterious lying?
Well, thanks to spelling, it's the word lie that means it's there, it's got its mighty heart, and it's still not risen from where it is in peace, in happiness, in stillness. But of course you can also say that lying means telling lies. And all that mighty heart is full of lies still. It's still full of lies.
Ah, look, that's a sonnet. That's what it is. It's a sonnet.
How is it?
Yeah, it's a sonnet. Look. Oh, the number of lines, they're kind of rhyming. It's a sonnet. So we only have like fair wear bear, and by majesty lie, sky, steep, deep asleep, here will still. So technically it's like from fair to air. That's the first part of it. And that's one long phrase, really. It's just one long sentence. From the earth to smokeless air, it's one big phrase. And the second and third phrase, two exclamations, that's the second part of the sonnet. Ah, very clever, very clever. So that's something that tells us about composition. So first part is we look at the city, the picture in general. Then we say never before. Never the sun did more beautifully steep. Never saw I. Never felt the concert deep. And the third part is. The river glideth at his own will, dear God, the very houses seem asleep, and all that mighty heart is lying still. Like the conclusion. Ah, interesting. So the river glideth at his own sweet will. Maybe a river is like time, or again, destiny, moving as it moves. And the people might be unreasonable now and then, but that's how the river goes, his own sweet will. Dear God, the very houses seem asleep. Again, maybe like people are asleep, people have their eyes closed, they don't see the beauty, they don't feel the splendor, they're too busy, too lost maybe. All that mighty heart is lying still. So the mighty heart, I guess he means people. So people have soul. He of soul who could pass by. People have heart, mighty heart. So your heart is really, really powerful, and what do you do with it? How do you use it? All that mighty heart is lying still. So on one hand, all people in all houses are asleep, and they're missing the moment of beauty, which is the poet's job to see. Then again, all that mighty heart is lying still to this moment. They are not telling the truth. In which case, he describes a big harmonious picture, and in the end he says, and people, each of you has a big mighty heart, amazing power to love, yeah, to be a part of beauty, a mighty heart, and still you're somehow out of tune with the grandeur, with the splendor, with God. How can it be? How can anyone who lives in such a beautiful universe, in London for instance, how could anyone be asleep? How can anyone not see it? How can anyone not participate in it? How can anyone lie still? That's the big, here we have the exclamation, but really it's a question. How can it be? All that mighty heart is lying still. How? And then again you can say that in this poem, the whole poem looks at a moment just before waking, which makes it so tense, so charged, just before waking, full of potential energy, which we can feel, which never gets released, because that's where the poem ends, but we feel it, and that's a contradiction which makes it work. Or maybe he's just really surprised. How can anyone living in such a beautiful universe be out of tune and not see it, not feel it? Because mighty heart is the next line after God, and so the heart is really mighty, really not joking. How can someone as powerful as humanity get so misleading? More comments? Okay, so that's a very nice sonnet. I like sonnets. We all like sonnets. Anything else here? So yeah, we feel relaxed, we feel peaceful, but at the same time, the last line brings a bit of disturbance. So when we read it, we go through it, we just enjoy it. It goes really smoothly. We don't have any screamers, as they say, when something is called on to make you scared. No, it's all really smooth. And as we go through it, we don't expect anything horrible. But the last line is the hidden sting in it. As we read to the end, it stings us, injects its medicine into your blood, to make you think, oh, wait a second, what is going on? Is it about me? Am I missing something very big and important in this life? Dear God, the very houses seem asleep, and all the mighty heart is lying still. So house can be like body. Yeah, inside the houses we have heart. So houses are like bodies. So he's like, I'm here at 4 in the morning. I'm not asleep, I'm awake, I see the beauty, and I'm really surprised that everyone around me is asleep. I really am. Wakey, wakey, people. Wakey, wakey. You're better than you might think you are. You're much better than that. And so again, it's the job of a poet to wake people up a bit. Say, hello, anyone home? So maybe that's what he does here. Maybe that's what he does here. Okay.